Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today with some repeating die backgrounds featuring my favorite things, stamps and dies. Two of my cards, the rainbow and the leaves backgrounds, feature new dies from the May 2020 release, and I had so much fun creating these that I went to my stash and pulled out the previously released watermelon slice to create another example of this technique. I love all over backgrounds as the repeating design kind of gives that look of pattern paper, but of course with the awesome texture of die cut images. I went ahead and die cut the My Favorite Things Stamps Rainbow Whimsy die from several shades of red, orange, and yellow cardstock. I'm then going to piece these together all over the front of a white top fold card base. What is awesome about this is that there is absolutely zero waste other than the part that I trim off the edge of the card. We're just going to alternate how we put together our rainbows all over the front of our card. So all of the pieces are going to be utilized, and we're simply just going to kind of tip and rotate that rainbow to fill in all of the space. I really wanted to do something different and non-traditional as far as rainbow went and not do the traditional rainbow colors, and instead kind of focused on more of these sunshiny bright colors with the reds, orange, and yellows. I decided to go ahead and lay out all of my dies first, and then I'm going to come back and glue them in place really carefully. This is going to ensure that I have enough room for all of the little parts and pieces. One of my favorite things to do when designing a card like this is that those pieces that get trimmed off the edge can always be used to fill in little spaces along the edge of the card design. You're going to see this especially with the rainbow card and the watermelon card. The leaves, I didn't really need to do that all that much, if at all, but often with designs like this, there's going to be little pieces that you trim off, and instead of having to die cut an entire other rainbow or watermelon or whatever that shape might be, you can usually fill in with those pieces that you trim off the edge. I am using liquid adhesive to glue my pieces down, and as I am building these rainbows and gluing them in place, I'm using an acrylic block or two to hold down the cardstock pieces until that glue is completely dry. That will also ensure that the design is completely flat on the front of the card base. So after I have given this a few minutes to dry, I'm going to take some long scissors and I'm going to go along the edge of my card and snip away those rainbows. And I'm just kind of going very slowly and trimming all of those up. Then I'm going to take some of these extra pieces from that bottom right rainbow, and I'm going to create another little portion of a rainbow along the top edge where I really feel like it needed just a little something extra. Again, this is going to hang off the edge of the top of the card, and we want to give that a few minutes to dry before we trim off that excess piece. Using the Simon Says Stamp Mini Hearts die, which has been out for several years now. I think it's maybe even from the original Simon Says Stamp release when they first came out with their own brand of products. But this has been a die I have used over and over and over. And what I love is that it die cuts these teeny tiny hearts in 3 different shapes. So I'm kind of taking the long skinny heart, and I am filling in the background of my design with some hearts and also the bottom part of the rainbow. These are all the same colors of cardstock that I used for the rainbows, and I love how it just kind of fills in that little area and adds a fun whimsical touch. Next, I'm going to take the brand new My Favorite Things Good Luck Greetings stamp set and some black cardstock, and I'm going to use a powder tool to prep my cardstock first and then stamp the sentiment "You were made for this" on the black cardstock with clear embossing ink. This is the Simon Says Stamp embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss with white embossing powder. The sentiment is a little longer than what I really want for my card. I kind of wanted a couple of rows of stacked text popped up with foam adhesive on the background. And in order to achieve this, what I'm going to do is take the My Favorite Things Skinny Strips dies, which work fantastic for any of the My Favorite Things little sentiments that come in those nice skinny strips. You can also simply trim this out with a paper trimmer if you want to, but I'm going to die cut the sentiment really carefully with one of the smaller dies from the skinny strips a couple of times to create 2 rows of text. Then I simply flip the die around and die cut the other edge so that it has that really nice finished edge that the die cut strips give. You can also use your scissors to trim that if you want to. So this is going to give me 2 kind of rows of text for this one phrase that says, "You were made for this." So you can see here that I flip that around. I'm going to temporarily tape that in place with a little purple tape, run that through my die cutting machine, and then I will do that for the second part of the sentiment as well before grabbing some foam adhesive. And then we're going to pop this up right in the middle of the card there. I don't want to cover up too much, but I think of it more as the background dies are pattern paper rather than considering it you're covering up your embellishment. It's both the background pattern and the embellishment for the card. So these foam strips are perfect for sentiment strips. I love them. And then we're simply just going to pop this up, and that is going to finish the front of the card. One of the great things about the Good Luck Greetings stamp set is there's this big good luck sentiment, and I really loved it, but it didn't work particularly with the front of my card design because it's very big and bold and prominent. But I still wanted to utilize that. So we are actually going to stamp the inside of our card with good luck. So it will read, "You were made for this, good luck" on the inside, and then you can handwrite whatever you want to on the inside of the card to go with that. To follow with the colors that I am using on the front of the cards, those reds, oranges, and yellows, I want to do a kind of an ombre effect of good luck on the inside of my card. So I'm actually going to take some Distress Oxide inks, which the Oxide inks have a little bit of pigment ink in them, which is going to work really well kind of to do that rock and roll technique where you add multiple colors to a stamped image. And I'm going to start with the fossilized amber and then the candied apple, and we'll put a little carved pumpkin in there as well. I like to go in with my lightest color first, which in this case is fossilized amber. And then we're just going to simply kind of tap on or roll on the candied apple along the bottom edge. I don't want a super harsh line there, so often I'll go back with the light color, the fossilized amber, and just kind of tap that right where the colors meet. I am using a Misty for this because it's going to allow me to stamp this a couple times if I need to, which I really want to. You can see it has kind of a line there. I can go back then with candied apple and this time some carved pumpkin and even maybe a little more fossilized amber along the top edge to just kind of help blend it all out. Stamp that again, and there is the beautiful good luck sentiment on the inside of my card, which perfectly finishes off the rainbow design. For our next card, we are going to use the awesome Grande Greenery outline and solid image. So there's both the solid and the outline, 2 different dies or die sets in the May release, and I love them. So I did a tone-on-tone design to do this all over leaf background. One of the things I really like about this is I did follow pretty much the same color scheme as the first card, but I pulled in some blues. And I think this is a design that is not overly feminine. So if you're ever looking for a card for a guy, I think this would work really nicely depending on the colors, especially that you choose to use here. So I just pulled in a little bit of blue. I die cut the solid image from the lighter color of the lighter shade of the cardstock, and then the outline from a darker shade. And then I'm simply doing exactly what I did with the rainbow background, where I laid everything out first. So I kind of could gauge where everything was going to go. I didn't have two of the exact same colors of leaves next to each other. And then I'm very carefully assembling those leaves. We're gluing the outline to the solid image and then gluing the whole thing to our white top fold card base. I kept it really simple today with just white card bases, but you could always add a different color of cardstock, or maybe do a background stamping first and add this on top. So many different ways to create an all over background pattern like this. We're going to continue to fill in all those little spaces, all those little nooks and crannies. I don't think I reused anything I trimmed off on this particular card design. I utilized, I believe, every single die cut, but when I trimmed it off, I didn't need to use anything. It was pretty well filled in. Another big tip for when you are creating an all over background pattern like this is to make sure that your images aren't just floating out in the center of your design, that they're hanging off the edge of your card panel so it looks more like a little snippet of pattern paper rather than just kind of floating out in outer space. So you can achieve that by having some of your images hanging off the sides of your card. I'm utilizing those acrylic blocks again to hold everything down and flat. It was really especially important with this design. The leaves are a little bit more delicate than the rainbow Whimsy pieces. And so this is going to just help hold everything nice and flat until that glue is completely dry. Now, once I have all of those pieces, I will flip this panel over, trim off all of the excess. I like to use a nice long pair of scissors, and I like to come from the back. It gives you a really nice guide to trim and follow. I'm going to go all the way around the perimeter of my card. And then we want to add a sentiment to this card as well. So this one is very similar to the first. We're going to use the good luck greetings. We're going to use the skinny strips to die cut those greetings. And this time I'm going to use the sentiment, I know how important this is to you. And then we will stamp good luck on the inside just like we did for the first card. So this sentiment is actually 2 rows of text, and I am going to die cut each of them separately to add to my card. And there are lots of fantastic sentiments in this good luck greetings stamp set. This is a great addition to the My Favorite Things collection. In addition to the "you were made for this" and "I know how important this is to you" phrases I'm using today, there is "you'll be amazing," "I know you don't need it, but," and then a little ... and then you can do "good luck," which I think is awesome. "Enjoy the journey and everything along the way. They're lucky to have you. The world is yours. Go for it." I think a lot of these would be fantastic for graduations as well, if you're getting ready to do some graduation cards. This was again stamped on black cardstock with a clear embossing ink and then heat embossed with white embossing powder. And I was just really careful then to take my sentiment strips and die cut each portion of the sentiment. I didn't have to stamp it twice. I was able to just die cut this one sentiment with my little strips. If you want to eliminate that step and maybe make it a little bit quicker, you can always simply just take your paper trimmer and trim those 2 strips apart and then trim them down. I use a powder tool, especially when I'm stamping on a dark cardstock like this, to help eliminate, hopefully, the little white embossing powder specks migrating everywhere and ruining the look of the stamping on the dark cardstock. And you want to make sure you take a dry rag or paper towel or Swiffer cloth or something like that and buff away that excess powder when you're through. That's what I was doing there with my blue microfiber cloth. And then we're going to trim down these strips just like we did before, where We trim kind of close to one side of the text, and then I like to flip it around and trim it again. I don't like a ton of overhang with my sentiment strips, and I also like both ends of the strip to look nice and finished with that die cut edge. We're going to pop these up with foam adhesive as well. And then instead of using the heart accents like we did on the first card, again, I wanted to keep this more a little bit masculine looking. I'm going to take some Nuvo crystal drops, and we're going to add little droplets all over the background. I'm using English mustard and autumn red. The great blue color is navy blue. And then we're going to use a little ripened pumpkin. So we're definitely just following the colors that we used, the cardstock colors we used when filling in and adding some great little droplets all over our background there. Our final card assembly is going to be using the watermelon slice, which has been out for a while, but I absolutely love it. There's two different styles of watermelon slices, and I'm going to use more of like that half slice instead of the like quarter slice piece. Mostly because of the size. I think the other one's a little bit bigger, so I thought the repeating pattern would be better with this kind of quote-unquote smaller one. It's still nice and substantial. I die cut the pieces, and then I'm simply piecing them all together all over the white card base. And this is an example of taking little bits and pieces from the ones I do have and filling in. And I really filled in multiple places here, kind of corners and sides and all of the things so that I could really fill in that background and make it full. And then we want to inlay all of the seeds into each watermelon slice. And I'm going to use a crystal katana and a little liquid glue to easily pick up all those little pieces and put them in place. Now I actually glued everything down first, and then you can see I trimmed off little parts and pieces, and then I'm piecing those together along the edges first. I want to make sure I have enough room to fill in everywhere. And I have that little spot down at the bottom, and then I even think up in that top right corner needs a little something too. This look can be achieved with many dies that you probably already have on hand. And it's one of my favorites. One of my favorite techniques is creating these all over die cut backgrounds. A crystal katana or a pickup tool of some sort comes in so handy when you need to pick up little parts and pieces and inlay them or add them to your card. And that can go for sequins or other little embellishments as well. So I added little dots all over inside where I have the die cut in the center of the watermelon, and then I'm inlaying all the little black seeds, making sure that if there's any little areas that are hanging off the edge that I'm gluing those down in place as well. You just want to make sure that the glue is dry before you go ahead and trim off that excess with your scissors so that it doesn't accidentally fall off. Now for the greeting on this card, I chose something that matched the theme of the die cuts a little bit better, and I'm going to take the Sweet Sentiments stamp set and also the Sweet die, which comes with the word and the outline. And just to mention really quick, there is a good luck greeting and outline that was released in the May release. So if you wanted to feature a die cut and a sentiment over the front of your die cut backgrounds for those first two cards, that would be a fun effect as well. If you didn't mind covering up a little bit more of what was going on, because it's a pretty big size. One of the things I liked about the suite for this card is it's fairly small. I die cut the word or the scripty word from red cardstock and matted it on the black outline. We're going to pop it up with a little foam adhesive right there on our card front. And then instead of using a black strip for this, we're going to use that light green that we used for part of the watermelon and stamp only a portion of the sentiment. We'll mask off the word sweet, since we're going to use the die cut word to finish the greeting for this card, and we're going to stamp thank you for being so with the clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder before trimming and die cutting with that sentiment strip. And I really love how it looks on the colored cardstock as opposed to black. I thought the black might be a little overwhelming, and where we used the black as the outline for the word sweet, I really wanted to use something different for my sentiment strip. We're going to peel off all the little backing pieces from the word sweet before we pop that down in place. And then use our foam adhesive. And I made sure and left a little space on the back of my strip where it overlaps the top of the letter T in sweet so that it lays nice and flat on my background. For this card, I didn't add anything on the inside, leaving it free to handwrite a note to the recipient. We are, however, going to fill in the background of this card with some Nouveau crystal drops as well in reds and greens, just to fill in some of that white space. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these repeating die-cut background cards featuring my favorite things, stamps and dies. The supplies I used to create these cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring all over die-cut backgrounds that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.